Yeah, so I went on to the ancient Egyptians because they were obviously a massive, like probably one of the earliest empires,
Uh-huh.
right? And definitely one that a lot of people kind of go, oh yeah, the ancient Egyptians, I know them, those guys, like the pharaohs and Ra and all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
So
Hieroglyphs.
yeah,
The River
although
Nile.
a very mysterious culture still.
Oh yeah.
Still no idea how they built the pyramids. And researchers now don't believe that they used slaves to build the pyramids.
Oh no, it's not viable to do that. They paid them. They did, they still had crappy quality life quality or whatever, but they were paid
Yeah,
for everybody. Like even the Bible doesn't really say that they were necessarily slaves,
yeah,
but for
um,
some reason everybody likes to think that they were slaves.
yeah. They would have, they, they couldn't have farmed enough slaves to build those pyramids. That likely
No.
took hundreds of years to build each.
Oh yeah. Like enough people over enough time, you can build anything you want.
Yeah,
Um, Still
yeah,
impressive.
yeah. Oh
And the
yeah,
fact that it took
massively.
so long.
They're still
Yeah.
standing today. That how old is the Egyptian Empire? I think 5,000 years or something like that. Although there's been several rise and falls in the Egyptian Empire, but
Hmm.
um, and obviously there isn't an Egyptian empire today. But
Yeah.
um, yeah. So the first thing I learned about them was that the ancient Egyptians knew about diabetes, and they also knew how to test for it. I think they called it the sugar disease.
Yeah, because the urine was sweet. Somebody just licked it. And,
No, no, that was medieval.
yeah.
So in medieval times, they knew about it, and what did they call it? It was a different name in medieval times. Um,
Yeah.
they
Somebody
called,
noticed that it
they called
smelled
it the
sweet,
sweet
so they
disease or
decided.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, it smelled sweet, so they decided to try it, did a little sample, and it tasted sweet, so they realized that sugar was leaving out in the urine.
So how the ancient Egyptians tested for it, which is, if you think about it, thousands of years before like medieval culture, which
Hmm.
was between like 300 AD and, or no, it wasn't 300, it was like 800 AD and like 1400 or something like that, 1500.
I have no
Um,
idea. I'm really bad with dates.
yeah, it was a fair time period in in modern human history in the last 2000 years.
Uh huh.
But in medieval times, they tested it, and this was only be like, like higher status, like knights and things,
Yeah.
kings and nobles. They tested it because they would have had a physician that would have come to them every morning whenever they woke up. Would have first thing they would have done was come to them, and they would have tested them for different things, and they would have been like, "Well, how are you feeling today?" and different things, and they would have been like, "Okay, well, he's feeling like this, so you need to feed him this." And I'll get into that in a bit, but they tested it by drinking it, and if the pee tasted sweet, then they knew not to give them cakes and things. Whereas the ancient Egyptians,
Bet
pee on,
doctors are happy now they don't have to drink it.
if you're right, pee on the stick. Um,
Yeah.
the ancient Egyptians knew how to test it because they would pee on the ground near an ant hill, and if the ants came to the pee and started drinking the pee, then it was full of sugar.
I think it's so cute
Didn't
that you're
need to
saying
drink it.
drinking the pee. It's like, oh, it could be urine, but
Didn't need to drink it because
no.
they found out if a healthy person peed near an anthill, the ants wouldn't go near it. But if you had diabetes and you peed near it, the ants would swarm because of the sugar.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Pretty intelligent for such an old culture.
Yeah. Oh, nobody's saying that these cultures didn't have any wisdom, and that's why I advocate for cultural wisdom.
Yeah,
A lot of people think that, oh, just because they were, it was years and years ago, these people are dumber than we are. It's like, no, I think you'll find that the population is actually getting dumber,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. Oh, for sure.
Like before, it
Um,
used to be, the saying was jack of all trades, master of one. Now it's jack of all trades, master of none. You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
you
So
need to do, before you needed to know how to cook, you needed to know something about politics. Uh, you needed to know how things worked because you're the only person that can sort of fix things in your own home.
yeah. Plus, news and intelligence wasn't widespread. So if you didn't find these things for yourself, you just stood no chance.
Yeah, and you had to remember them. Nowadays, you don't have to remember anything because it's like, oh, I don't
That's
remember.
a real
Let
problem.
me quickly Google that.
It's a
See,
real
Google said,
problem because
yeah,
your brain defaults. Like human brains are starting to default to I don't need to retain it because I can search it at any point.
yeah,
So even though you're trying to learn things, your brain is like, Google, bro.
yeah.
I know, but I want to know. I want to remember
Mhm.
that. Nah, just search it.
The best way, the way I look at it though, is that you need to try to remember things that you think is true because there are a lot of other things out there that disprove it. So you need to fully understand your position before.
Yeah.
Somebody can easily say, "Well, I found a study here saying blah blah blah," and it's like, yeah, but did you check the sources? Are there any biases involved? Have you done it in your own personal testing? What works for you? What doesn't work for you?
Yeah. Oh, you mean
Like
that
anything that
study
I've
by
done,
Lab Bible, bro?
I've tested every diet that
Legit.
I've been interested in on myself, and if it's worked, I've kept elements of it, and if it didn't, I immediately remove it.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
vegetarian for 4 years.
It's the best way to figure things out, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's going back to the old adage of failure is the best teacher of all.
Yeah, I'm happy enough to say if I don't know what I'm talking about, and if I'm wrong, I'll change my opinion. But you need to demonstrate that I'm wrong.
Yeah, true. Which is a problem because a lot of people can't accept that they're wrong, and therefore keep going on with these complete farcical teachings.
Yeah, and there's
Uh,
some things, especially with diet anyway. It's something that you can't really prove to be 100% correct anyway, because it's inhumane to lock a whole hundreds of people in a lab for 50 years and just give them specific food to test whether or not it's actually healthy. Unfortunately, a lot of this will be anecdotal, but the overwhelming majority of anecdotal evidence towards a meat-based diet is positive, and
yeah,
it is reversing a lot of conditions. And the more of the strict guidelines that we take on board, the more sick people get. Diabetes is on the rise. They say it's like, oh, well, we didn't have proper ways of testing and recording information way back when. It's like, no, we did. And you
we
can tell
did.
definitively that people get more heart attacks now. People are definitely fatter than they've ever been. People definitely have more diabetes than ever. I work at the hospital, and I can tell you cancer is increasing all the time.
Exponentially.
Yeah, it's the biggest growing industry in health at the minute is
Yeah,
cancer research and treating cancer treatment because people are constantly getting it.
yeah. And
And
it's
what is
not
the
just the
cause?
poor; it's everyone. It's not
Yeah,
just the poor or the rich. Everyone's getting it.
yeah, because they're following bogus health advice from people that don't know what they're talking about,
Yeah.
and they're blindly trusting it like I used to do. And
Mhm.
and I ended up feeling sicker than I ever did. Like I never got sick growing up, and then I become vegetarian for 4 years, and I'm sick all the time. I get headaches chronically,
Mhm.
and then now I'm virtually headache free. I still work in an environment that causes headaches because I work in an aseptic unit, so there's a lot of alcohol in the air, and then there's the HEPA filtration and constant dry air messing with your sinuses and eyes and
Yeah.
things like that. But I don't get sick.
Yeah. And
Sorry, a bit of a tangent
that's
there.
well, no, it's true though because it's through diet change.
Yeah, I think
Um,
diet is literally the building block of your body. Whatever you put in makes a difference. And
yeah,
there's so many nutrients in plants that they say uh, that you need that you can't get from animal-based sources, but that's a lie. You can get everything you need from animal-based sources, but the thing is, you can't get certain things from a plant-based source that you can get from an animal-based source. There are nutrients that you cannot get on a
which is
vegetarian vegan diet.
at a point something you argued against as well.
Yeah, years ago.
Whenever you were vegetarian, you were saying, "Well, I get all the proteins I need."
Yeah, but I didn't understand about bioavailability and then actual what was the word I'm thinking of? I
I
think it's
have that.
mostly bioavailability where your body
I have
can't
that problem all the
process.
time. Can't remember
Yeah,
words.
yeah. But they say, oh, if you eat beans and rice, you get a complete protein. It's like, yeah, but can your body absorb that properly?
Yeah.
Your body can absorb 100% of the meat that you ingest. It cannot do that with plant-based foods.
Hmm.
But there are also certain things in meat. Again, we've talked about this before that you cannot get in plant-based food. Creatine, for one, you cannot get that in a plant-based source.
Yeah.
You can only get creatine from meat.
Yeah.
Uh, Collagen, you cannot get that from any plant-based source. You can only get that from meat.
Which
Carnosine is
really,
another
really
one.
for most people. collagen is something that your body heavily needs, especially if you're
Oh
doing a
yeah.
lot of if you're doing
If you wonder why vegans age so rapidly, it's because they don't have enough collagen in the skin.
yeah. And
You need collagen for your hair,
if you're
nails,
doing
skin,
if you're doing
digestion.
a lot of active work, if you're out in a farm and all the rest of that, you really need collagen.
Well, it's what gives your skin its elasticity. It helps, they've done research on, I did this in part of my pharmacy thing where you can get collagen bandages.
Hmm.
So they did test it on these bandages that they get. So they'd cut you open and they put a little balloon underneath your skin. They'd sew it up, put on one regular bandage and then one collagen filled bandage.
Hmm.
And then after it's all healed up, what they do is they start pumping air into this balloon to pump it up. So the one with the collagen bandage, I think when it comes to the tensile strength of the skin, it was 60% stronger than the one without it. So it took longer for that to reopen than the one without the collagen. So directly applying it to the skin can help.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of makeups have collagen in them. So when you put it on your face, it helps smooth out the wrinkles.
Yeah.
But you can get it through your diet. Eat meat. Eat plenty of meat.
Yeah. And I mean, healthier skin all around.
Mm-hmm.
Healthier teeth, healthier nails, healthier
Well,
hair.
not so much your teeth, but your nails, skin, and hair.
Yeah. I suppose.
Most tissue, anyway.
Your teeth will be healthier anyway. By way of
Well, if you're eating animal-based sources, yeah,
Yeah.
because then you get your vitamin K and D and
yeah,
A and stuff like
but
that,
not
which help
collagen.
with
Yeah,
you.
I don't know why I said teeth. I was thinking nails and hair, but I said teeth.
Yeah, but even
Stupid
still,
brain.
it's all in the same thing, though, so it all
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So back to the Egyptians. One thing that we all know, if you went to school and you even grazed over Egyptian culture, you know that they were massively into grain.
Uh-huh.
Like they have massive fields of grain. Now, in Egypt, pretty much every town and city is along the River Nile. The entire Egyptian culture is based on the Nile River.
Mm-hmm.
Which like they had different names for it. It was like one of the names I think was like the Life Giver or something like that because
Uh-huh.
they couldn't survive outside it because it was nothing but barren desert.
Mm-hmm.
They had to be near it. So that a good part of the diet, especially for the lower classes in Egypt, was fruits, nuts, and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
But because they were on the Nile River, which at the time was extremely clean, I don't know what it looks like these days, but
Probably not the same.
probably not. But it was absolutely abundant with fish.
Yeah.
So
And then other things grow around it as well.
yeah, most
So
people
you
would
get
have
other
had
animals
fish.
and
Hmm.
birds and
Yeah.
yeah.
Now they wouldn't have had too much in the way of other meat outside fish, but they definitely would have had fish. They would have fruits, nuts, vegetables, and fish. So I would say at least once a day, most people were eating fish.
I imagine they,
Um,
the water birds and stuff like that.
They
I don't
probably
know
would
if they
have
had
ate
ducks and
some.
stuff, but
They didn't have ducks. I think I've no, I
well,
didn't.
whatever their equivalent
I didn't
seabird
write it
is.
down, but there was a bird,
Yeah.
similar to a duck.
Yeah, and they would have eaten reptiles and things as well. It's not like,
Yeah, they probably would have eaten like wee geckos and all kinds of things.
yeah, like the Simpsons did a funny thing with the Moses parody when there were the frogs and they just ate them all.
Yeah.
I'm sure they ate the amphibians. People, you eat
Yeah.
whatever animals that you have.
Yeah, it's
It's
not
only
like the French
weird
people.
now.
It's not like the French were the first people to go, "Oh, look, frogs, let's cook this."
Yeah.
You know. So
That's the other interesting thing about cooking your food because it denatures venom as well. So if you have a poisonous amphibian that you shouldn't eat, as soon as you cook it, it makes it more acceptable. But there are some exceptions with like pufferfish and thing, but I think that's eaten raw anyway.
pufferfish
Yeah, I think they eat that raw.
isn't pufferfish the one that they use for like sushi, but it's like really, really dangerous. Like there's
Yeah,
only like
it'll either kill you or it'll put you in a death-like coma.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think they eat that raw. If they cooked it, I think it'd be a bit different. I'm not sure. I don't know much about it, but I'm just saying.
Yeah,
As a general rule, most animals are safe.
I'm not gonna say to anyone go cook a pufferfish, should be fine.
No.
Yeah, basically, Egypt had a class system, which
Mhm.
wasn't the first place, definitely wasn't the last. But I mean, possibly popularized the class system. And the higher status you were within Egypt, the more meat you ate. Because they would have had sheep and goats. I'm sure there would have been cows. I don't know about pig.
Yeah, I'm looking it up now. About the animals that they had, ancient Egyptian livestock.
Yeah. They definitely did have livestock, but
Yeah, crocodiles. They
they
would have eaten
didn't
that.
rely on it for food as much.
They had cattle.
Yeah. They would have had
Uh,
cows and sheep. I don't think they would have had pigs. Or boars. It wouldn't be too barren, because obviously pigs and boars were more forest animals.
yeah, they had horses. I'm sure they ate some horses.
Yeah.
Uh, chickens. They had chickens.
Yes.
Yeah, so they had their poultry. Like they had a lot of meat.
They did, but it wasn't an abundance. It wasn't, because Egypt was a big place. They didn't have, enough to feed everyone with chicken or beef or sheep, whatever.
Apparently, they even had some elephants.
I'm sure they probably would have eaten elephants at some point.
Not that they ate them. I'm just saying that they apparently had some.
I'm sure they probably did though.
Yeah.
Whenever they were getting old and not useful.
Once the Romans kind of became a thing, actually, they did introduce pigs.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah, large in Greek times as well, actually.
Yeah.
So it's not like they would have traded with other civilizations for certain livestock. They had plenty of stuff.
Yeah, and they conquered plenty of countries that they would have went, oh, that's cool. Let's bring it back. Another thing is that obviously water was really hard to get back before we had proper filtration, and a lot of cultures learned how often they would have gotten sick from drinking water from a contaminated source.
I would have said that clean water was much easier to come by back then. Much easier.
In
Now
a
that we've
sense,
polluted a lot of stuff.
yes, definitely.
Like you
But
could have had hundreds of thousands of people not drinking.
they still knew how dangerous it was through how many people got sick from drinking water from different sources and how easily it was to contaminate them. Because obviously, you could be drinking from a mountain spring and it looks all right from the bottom of the mountain, but there could be a goat dead at the top of it that's contaminated the whole thing. It happened. It happens.
Yeah, but I don't think it would be one of those major cause for concerns. Like nowadays,
Well,
because we're so used to having everything ultra filtered, before we would have been able to handle it.
It was a cause for concern, which is why beer was the staple drink. In ancient cultures, beer was a staple drink. Now, it had very low alcohol content, so they wouldn't have got drunk on it. And very, very regional. Most places had their own version of beer, ale, whatever. All different types. And it just depended where you were, what you had available to make it. Which is one of the reasons why they grew so much grain. Was
For
because
hops.
yeah, exactly. They turned it into beer to drink. Everyone would have drank it. And like I said, very low alcohol content, so it might have kept people happy, but it wouldn't have got them drunk.
Yeah.
Although they did also have wines.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. I knew they had beer in ancient Egypt, but I didn't think it was, like oh look, lunchtime, chug a beer. Back to building these pyramids. Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. Can't live. You can't do heavy lifting if you're drunk. It's never a good idea. Yeah. So
I'm not entirely sure how much I believe that beer would have been the main drink. I needed to look a little bit more into that one.
yeah. Well, from what I
it's
found,
dehydrating. Alcohol is dehydrating.
yeah.
It wouldn't make sense
From
to
what
drink it all
I
the time.
found, that's what it said. They would have drank water. They obviously would have drank water as well. I'm not saying they didn't drink water.
Yeah.
Um.
It's just I know from experience the alcohol, the reason you get hangovers and stuff like that is due to dehydration.
Yeah. Like
with
I said,
alcohol.
it was like the beer they were making was like sub 1% alcohol content, very very low,
Mm.
almost alcohol free. Because they obviously knew the effects of it.
Yeah, but if you had other crap in it, it's not like the fermentation process eliminates all of the other bacteria that's in it. You need to let it ferment
It
for a long time for a particular bacteria to overtake the rest of them.
it wouldn't have got rid of all of them, but it probably was safer than just
I
finding
don't
a
know how
random
much I
water source
believe
and
that.
drinking
I
it.
think it's just a bunch of alcoholics trying to say that it's fine
You never
because the
know.
ancient
It
Egyptians did
could
it.
be, yeah. Like all these researchers could be like they like to drink.
Because then you need to think about it from before the advent of agriculture as well, when they couldn't do, or when they weren't growing all these different grains. You know, they weren't drinking alcohol all the time. They needed to get their water from somewhere.
Yeah. Well,
The River Nile would have been a nice clean source.
but that also could have been part of it. Maybe for further fields and stuff, they didn't want to drink the water, um, because they wanted to use it for their crops.
Well, you still need to use a lot of water for your fermentation process with the beer.
Yeah. But you'll get a lot more returned. I guess. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what way my brain was going about that, but
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing to think about. I'm just
yeah,
not I'm not sold on it.
yeah. Well, and no, the other I've mentioned medieval a couple times. That's because it's the other one I looked at because it's one I actually knew about a bit. But
Uh huh.
they also drank a lot of beer, which
Hmm.
is again very regional. Uh, from the very lowest class to the highest class, they all would have drank a lot of beer.
Ale.
Again, very low in alcohol content mostly. Um, and specifically, I looked at more like English medieval, like castles and kings and knights, you know.
Yeah,
But
but I think that again is more of an indulgent thing. I don't think they did it because they believed it to be healthy.
well, no, it was because they believed it to um get rid of a lot of the bad things that would have been in war. Because again,
Yeah, but all you have to do is
all
heat the
through
water.
history, people have like massive plagues have been caused through people drinking from a water source.
A contaminated one, but
Yeah.
everybody knows if you boil water and let the sediment settle and then just
But
don't
did they
drink
know
the
that back
sediment.
then?
Hmm?
But how far back did they discover this?
When they invented fire,
I-
they would
I'm
eat
not so I'm
the
not so
heating
sure.
process they would have figured out first because fermentation is a complicated process. That one would have been figured out accidentally, whereas the heating one can be very intentional.
Yeah, but I'm not so sure that they figured out, oh, if we boil water and then just let it cool and like separate it and drink it, that it'll be fine. I don't know. I haven't looked into that, so I have no idea.
To
I have
me,
no
that just
idea.
makes more sense. Again, if you,
Yeah,
I like to go through the path, and since we're talking about ancestral dieting, I like to go to the furthest point that makes sense.
yeah. I didn't look at water at all,
Okay.
so it's
Sorry,
not something that
you
I.
just brought it up as a little interesting side point, and I turned it into a
Yeah,
topic.
yeah, no, it's fine. But from what I like, the few times that they were bringing up water, which they did in most cultures, and that I looked at,
Hmm.
it was because they were substituting water for some sort of beer or ale, um, which I
I think it's a bunch of scientists
pa-
that are trying to
part
justify their unhealthy habits.
part of it is me assuming that they did it because they believed it to be healthier,
Hmm.
a way of cleaning like a cleaning process. But I don't know. I haven't looked into it that much, so
Yeah.
um, but ale and beer was present through many many different cultures as a way of substituting water. It might just because they were bored of water. Who knows?
Well, it's like now most people don't like drinking water. I love drinking water
Um,
personally, but a lot of people they prefer to drink sugary things, and
yeah,
unfortunately, alcohol. Because you're saying the alcohol content was much lower, that means the sugar content was much higher, so it was a sweet thing to drink.
yeah. Um, so then I looked at different ones, but the ones I've recorded are Egypt and then medieval. So medieval's when a class system really broke down diet because it really started to separate it. So like if you were a peasant in medieval times, you would have had a brown bread, and you would have had some fruit and vegetables, very basic garden vegetables. Like
Yeah. Depending on the
especially
time of year, yeah.
yeah, you would have had like peas and carrots and
Autumn time,
um,
get some apples and things, but they were
yeah,
quite bitter at the time.
yeah. But they also would have used a lot of salmon or other fish,
Hmm. Yeah.
uh, which is actually quite funny because if you think about it now, brown bread, um, uh, non, what would you call it? Pesticide-free fruit and vegetables,
Yeah,
and
non-GMO and
salmon and other fish like bass and all these other kind of fish. That's a that's an expensive meal.
I know it's kind of funny the way that it's kind of worked out. Like
Yeah,
peasant food years ago is now rich people food,
yeah.
and
It,
then rich people food is
it,
now peasant food.
quite literally. The
Yeah.
higher you went in the class system in times gone by, the more white flour would have been
Yeah, the
used.
more refined stuff that you could
Yeah,
afford because the refining process was expensive. Now it's dirt cheap.
yep,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's completely flipped because brown bread, like if you were a king or a like a bishop, some higher class standard, you were expected to eat very little bread because the bread that was left over from your meal was given as alms to the poor.
Hmm.
So you would eat some bread, for part of your first course, whatever. But then you would have been expected to leave a load. Otherwise, you were a nasty person, a selfish person, and obviously reputation was everything.
Yeah.
So, um, most families would have had a pig back then. The pig,
Hmm.
they would have killed it, and they would have used preservatives like salt, um, which at the time would have been crazy expensive.
Salt?
Yeah,
No.
yeah, in medieval
In
times.
medieval times, really? Salt?
Yeah, it was.
Everybody like salt is a crucial thing. You need it for so many different things.
Yeah, but it was
I need
it
to
would have
look
been
into that one.
yeah, it would have been really expensive. Um, Not so expensive that a peasant couldn't get it, but they would have had like a salt source that would have had to last them like a year. But over in general, yeah, it was expensive.
Oh, okay, yeah, it was extremely labor intensive, so that would have made it expensive.
Yeah, because they had to mine it. Um, yeah, so like they didn't have sea salt or anything. They had to go into mines and they had to use their pickaxes to hollow out caves and farm it. Um,
Okay, here's one thing here saying it salt wasn't necessarily expensive, but it would where does it say? Hold on. It's not so much that salt was expensive, but the salt trade overall was a huge industry. Salt was one of the very few commodities in the Middle Ages which was both essential and in many places needed to be imported.
yeah,
Vast majority of staple goods being produced locally. So
yeah,
it was
so,
essential. People needed to have it in order to preserve food, like you were saying, because in order to cure, say, bacon, your pork
yeah,
belly into bacon or make your
mhm,
sausage, you needed to have a certain amount of salt to
yeah.
cure it with.
But the problem was obviously if you lived in um, Manchester and the closest salt mine was outside London,
Mm-hmm.
that has to travel, which very quickly adds cost to that. So it did depend partially on where you lived, because the further they had to um, send the salt, the more you would have had to pay.
Yeah, but that
And
doesn't necessarily mean it was out of the means of the people to actually have it.
no, no, it was definitely cheap enough that anyone could have bought salt, but it was
Yeah.
still expensive enough that a peasant would have had to, like it would have been a big part of them whatever they got paid would have been buying salt,
Mm-hmm.
so that they could keep begging because everyone had a pig. They would have reared it through the year, and come late autumn, they would have killed it, and then the meat would have fed them through the whole winter.
From one pig for a whole family?
Generally, yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Well, that wouldn't do you the whole winter. You'd have to
No,
ration that
but
really well.
yeah, they did ration it, but they obviously they used every part of it, the hooves, the snout,
Oh yeah,
everything.
bone broths, everything, render down the
Yeah,
fat. There's
yeah,
preservation methods using fat as well. Get the
yeah,
pork crackling as well.
yep. They would have used everything, and they would have had it well rationed. But at the same time, they obviously would have, like they would have got whatever they could.
That's actually the saddest thing
Fish,
about
fish, and
pigs
things.
is for humans, pigs only serve a purpose dead, which I think is kind of sad. They
Unless
have
you're hunting
more.
truffles.
Yeah, but I don't even think pigs are overly great at that. You'd use something different, like.
Probably not.
Mm.
Um,
But they have more utility dead than alive, and I think that's just sad. Like a cow, you can work it. Chicken lays eggs.
yeah,
Cow, or female cows, they produce milk.
yeah.
Goats, they produce milk. Sheep
Horses
produce
are
wool.
extremely good workers.
Mm.
Yeah,
But
and
pigs,
people don't even know eat horse anymore. What a shame.
no.
I'm
Well, they use them
getting
for
in trouble
violins
for
and
saying
stuff
that
like
even.
that as well.
Yeah,
They used horses for lots of stuff like violins and
violins.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Glue.
and yeah, glue. All different things. Probably waxes as well, because they used to
Yeah,
make
well,
wax
it
from animal
depends.
fat.
Yeah, it was the suet. It's a waxy fat. It's
Yeah,
better to eat it though than to make anything else out of it.
yeah. So one thing you'll be glad to hear is that, and that you would obviously know, these peasants would have used a lot of butter and a lot of stock, as you said, bone broths, all kind of things.
Oh yeah, they
Anything
used
they can get their
everything.
hands on that they can basically boil,
And
they
probably
would
not
use
butter.
for stock.
I would say it would be pig fat. Butter was a rich person's thing as well because there was a process that you had to go through to make it.
No, no, they all would have had butter, but it wouldn't be buttered like we know it today. It probably would have been very um cheap compared to today's standard. Like
Yeah, no, it's just if you know much about the butter making process, it's a simple process, but the richer people would have had the cream to make it,
yeah,
whereas other people would
yeah,
have just had milk. It's harder to make it with milk than cream. It's
yeah.
better to have the cream.
It would have just been churned milk basically.
Hmm.
Um,
But there are other uses.
yeah.
But
So
most people would have cooked in fat, like pig fat, lard,
yeah,
and tallow.
definitely. And um,
Butter also burns, so it's not really good for high temperature cooking. It's good as a condiment,
yeah,
but you wouldn't necessarily cook with butter. It would, again, always be fat.
yeah. Well, they also did have cheese.
Hmm.
Peasants would have had cheese, and that would have been your lunchtime meal. You would have had brown bread with cheese.
Yeah, that's a preservation method, which actually even increases the nutrient value of dairy.
Yeah. They also had pottage, though. Do you know what pottage is?
It's like a kind of like a porridge thing.
Well,
No.
yes and no. It's anything cooked in a pot. So a lot of the times they would have had because peas are obviously very plentiful, they would have had like peas pottage, which is basically just peas cooked in a pot. You would have had
Super stew. Yeah, pottage
vegetable
is
pottage.
super stew.
Yeah, it's just stuff cooked in a pot.
Yeah, but this is where I got mixed up because it's
Yeah,
mostly vegetables and grains
yeah. It's
with
lit.
that. So it's a soup or a stew
It,
because
it
you'd have meat, fish, and other stuff.
it could have been. Sometimes it was just boiling things. Sometimes it was just it was basically anything that you can just cook in a pot. They called it pottage, which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So back in beans, vegetables, they would have had some herbs, but it would have been very local. Um, like onions, they would have salt. They would have had salt, like salted meat and dried meat for preservation. Um, they also would have used a lot of sauces, but they're basic sauces using, like milk and basic herbs,
Uh huh.
things like that. Um, and they also, I think they invented. I can't be quoted on that, but I think they invented pie
Who? Medieval time?
in medieval times. Yeah,
Oh yeah, the hard crust pastry.
yeah,
Yeah, that was made with suet as well. So you used animal fat in the process of that or
yeah.
making that.
But you didn't actually eat the pie crust a lot of the time.
Yeah, it was really dense
Yeah,
and
it
hard to
was.
eat.
Yeah,
And
it
then
was
when they
near impossible to eat. You would have lost teeth. It was like rock. It was basically used as a casing to cook things in. It's the same as you
Well, it's
putting
it's the
something in.
same thing with bread. Actually, old bread used to be cooked at such a high temperature that the outer crust you wouldn't really eat. It was mostly burnt and disgusting and gross. You'd crack it open and eat the inside of the bread.
Mhm.
But then with better temperature control, now the crust is probably the best part of the bread
Yeah,
because that's where all the caramelization happens.
yeah. Makes your hair curly. That's uh, that's what we were always told as kids. Eat your crust, it make your hair curly. And then all the kids are going, "Why would I want curly hair?
Yeah, I eat the
What's wrong
crust.
with
My
you?"
hair's not curly.
Mine's a little bit
Yeah.
wavy, but it's not really curly. It is whenever it gets longer. So yeah, so that was basically the lower class, the lowest of the low. Whenever you were talking about medieval times, which is kind of funny because their diet was actually extremely good.
That was better. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
compared to like even if you look at today's diet, their food would have been like very middle class.
Oh yeah, rich people back then, like they ate so many refined sweets and things. They did eat a lot of meat, but it's completely ruined by the fact that they drank tons of wine, lots of
Mhm.
different, ales and alcohols,
Yeah,
and then they ate their cakes and all their sweet treats,
yep,
parties and banquets and things like that, and
yeah,
all their
so,
fresh fruit because they could afford it, and refined sugar because again they could afford it. They put sugar in their teas and things like that, whereas other people couldn't afford that. So
yeah.
you'd end up with rich people being fat, and that's how it became a status symbol. But they were also the ones getting sick.
King Henry,
Yeah, or they're getting those long-term sort of illnesses, related to that the way that they eat, rather than
diabetes. Yeah,
yeah. So peasants got their main way of dying was they'd get a virus of something that they couldn't fight off, or they'd get I think the most common thing was they'd get some kind of injury and they couldn't recover from it.
yeah,
They were or they get impaled on something and some pathogen gets into the body. So,
yeah.
but
Or
it wasn't
or just work
chronic
accidents.
disease. Yeah,
Yeah.
accidents. It wasn't chronic disease that killed them.
No, not generally.
Not like now.
Unlike the higher class.
Yeah.
So whenever you move up a class or several classes, you go up to like the night class, which is like middle class. Because obviously they work because they're like knights or retainers, and they've they have to show their worth.
I would say knights are upper class. It was
They
soldiers
were
that may
fair.
have
They were
been
fairly upper class. Um,
because the
especially
knight owned
such
land and
huge
everything.
jumps. Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they
And
definitely
they
would have
had
been middle
staff.
class.
They had staff.
Yeah.
They
I think you're thinking more soldiers because knights would have been, I would say, upper class.
soldiers would have been a very small step up from a peasant. It would
Mhm.
not a massive step. Knights, however, were a big jump up. Um, it's
It was a
kind
whole
of
good
like
time.
yeah, it's kind of like a poor rich person today, I guess, would have been a knight. Like if you look at Elon Musk and he's looking at I don't know some high level athlete that doesn't get like a massive pay.
Mhm.
Like someone that a footballer that's not a massive name but still a world class footballer
Yeah.
has millions of dollars. Elon Musk is like rich, yeah, whatever. That was a night. They were kind of entry level rich. Um,
Yeah.
but they actually had the physicians. Knights had physicians, and that they had a very interesting way of deciding uh, what a knight should eat each day, and it was basically based on hot, wet, cold, and dry.
Yeah, that was stupid. Those physicians.
Yeah, there are actually
I know
some.
about this.
Yeah, there are actually some things that are like, well, actually that made sense, but for the most part, it's ridiculous. It's like a superstition thing.
Hmm.
Um, I just thought that was kind of
Yeah, it
funny.
was their way of figuring out imbalances. It's like, oh no,
Yeah,
your diet is too wet. You need to change. It's like, nah, that's
yeah.
bullshit.
So like hot and dry would have been like add turmeric to that,
Hmm.
things like that. Um,
But well, anyway, we've been going quite long with this podcast. Maybe we should save a little bit of this.
yeah. Well, this was the last one I wanted to say about it anyway. But
Okay.
basically, this is whenever you started getting white bread. They would have used like spelt flour and things. Um, they have far worse health, partially because well they were eating a lot of white bread,
Yeah,
And
all the nutrition came from the bits that they got rid of.
yeah, they also this is where you started getting like really exotic foods.
Hmm.
Um, but they would have had spice boxes, and their spice
Hmm.
boxes would have been worth literally in today's money, literally hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Yeah, depending on what they had in their spice box.
Yeah, but in general, hundreds of thousands, and you had to be like you had to be like the head of the household, bar obviously the knight, to even open that thing. You would had to be like the head chef of the house because it would have had several cooks.
Yeah, and you had to use it sparingly.
Yeah,
You had to be very,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, it's a special occasion. Oh, let's use some.
nutmeg, some
Yeah,
cinnamon,
yeah, crazy. They
maybe
would have been.
saffron.
Yeah, saffron was like,
It's still the most expensive spice
yeah,
today.
yeah, it was like gold.
Hmm.
Um, they would have eaten a lot of rabbit, beef, sheep, pheasant, um, spiced wines, and puddings. So
There's
that's
actually
really
there's a
where their
condition
health started
associated
to
with
drop.
there was a condition associated with eating too many rabbits, so the people knew not to eat too much because they were
Uh,
very lean. We needed fattier sources.
it's a protein deficiency actually. It's called rabbit sickness.
It's a fat deficiency, from what I can tell. It's not protein.
Sorry, it's a fat deficiency. Yes, yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. And
yeah.
it's actually too high in protein because you get far more protein than fat.
That's almost entirely protein because
Yeah,
there's no fat.
yeah,
So
yeah. So it's actually called rabbit sickness.
yeah.
Um, I can't remember where there was a place figured it out because they had loads of rabbits. So that's all they really had to eat. They didn't have really any fat source from anywhere.
Hmm.
And this, oh, I think it was actually uh, what's the name of um, it's going to sound really bad. You know the guys that live in like igloos and stuff?
The Inuit Eskimo type.
Yeah, like Eskimo type people and Inuits.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think it was them figured it out because they had like a lot of like Arctic hares and things.
Hmm. They needed to
Yeah,
eat more things like
that's all they would
seal
have had to
fat
eat.
and
Yeah,
walruses and
yeah. But I think it's I wanted to look at diet history because I think it's a really interesting topic to go back and look at how you can literally see if you follow the timeline, you can literally see sugar becoming more and more prevalent. But
hmm.
I also thought it was extremely interesting to come across how often cultures put an emphasis on honey.
Yeah, no, honey's good.
Yeah,
Like it was hard to get because people didn't want to get stung,
yeah.
but once they developed other ways, they started farming the bees.
The Egyptians actually uh, found these birds and then trained them. I'm not sure if they did train them or they just trained themselves to follow these birds, but these birds specifically, um, they're not nice birds. They would have stole the homes from other animals to lay their eggs, and then they would have left
Hmm.
left, you know. Um, but they particularly liked um, beehives,
Hmm.
so they would have led humans to beehives. So it would have taken like an hour for the Egyptians to find honey. They just followed these birds. The birds led them to
Okay.
the beehive. They took all the honey and then was like, "There you go, bird. There's your nest." So
Well, the thing I like about doing all this research when it comes to food history, I don't know an awful lot. I just know what I need to know
yeah,
when it comes to what I believe a proper diet to be.
yeah,
But it's certainly interesting. But you can tell that if you do any research on ancient cultures, while they do eat grains and other plant-based foods, it wasn't their main source
yeah. They're always
of
searching
nutrients.
for meat.
Yeah, everything was, like they say meat and potatoes for a reason. Meat comes first because that's the
Yeah,
main thing that they wanted.
yeah,
Potatoes also have a lot of calories, but then they never talk about eating lots of vegetables and how that they're healthy. We didn't evolve that way. We didn't develop that way.
yeah.
Um,
And the
no
funny thing
culture
is,
in the history of the planet has ever been vegan. There have been vegetarian, but none have ever been vegan. It's not a healthy way for human beings to develop.
The funny thing is, if you actually look at it, if you look at research from today, especially if you're looking at, like weight loss diets and things, they all say stay away from potatoes. Potatoes have no nutritional value and they're terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I
Good energy
disagree.
source.
Yeah,
They don't
exactly.
have too much of a nutritional value, but they're a good energy source.
Yeah, which means that they have a place in your dietary table.
If it's what you want, yeah. Again, like I'm not saying you should never eat them. If you're a high performance athlete and you need some carbohydrates in your system, then fine, sure, go ahead. But I don't believe it is necessary. There's no such thing as a essential carbohydrate.
Yeah,
If you can
I love
tolerate them, fine, absolutely go for it. I enjoy eating potatoes from time to time. Uh, I don't eat them all the time.
I love potatoes.
Yeah, you're Irish.
Yeah, my mom can't eat them. Interestingly, they give her an upset stomach.
No, my mom loves potatoes too.
Yeah,
And I don't see anything wrong with them inherently. It's just, again, one of those things. If you eat them constantly, they're not going to be good for you.
yeah,
Carbohydrates in general lack too many nutrients
yeah. Well,
to
I
be good for
I,
you.
I generally have potatoes with my dinner.
As long as the majority of your meal is meat and fat, you're fine. But most people end up having the majority of their plate is like half of it's mashed potatoes, and you have a few, chicken or fish fingers or something silly, and then
Yeah.
some corn, sweet corn that you can't even absorb anyway. How is that a
That's
healthy meal?
that's one thing I've always found really weird is how I know a lot of people that love sweet corn and are like obsessed with sweet corn, and I'm like,
Because it's sweet.
yeah, but I don't think it tastes nice. I think it's
I
crap.
like sweet corn. I don't
I
mind it.
don't like it at all.
But again, whenever you
But then,
digest it, most of it
yeah,
comes out again.
yeah. Every time you go to the toilet, you're like, oh look, there's just a sweet corn,
Yeah.
and
So
I've always
what
found
nutritional
that
value are
crazy.
you getting out of that? Same thing with seeds. You eat seeds, they come out the same way. What's the point of even eating them?
Yeah,
You don't
I've
get
always
any
found
benefit from having them.
I've always found that crazy. If
Yeah.
you eat something and you can see it whenever it comes out the other end, you can like literally see it. What's the point in eating it?
Yeah, exactly. Other than it adds some texture and maybe, some nice, it makes it a more pleasant experience to eat, or you like the flavor.
Yeah,
But to think of it as a healthy nutritional thing,
yeah.
no point.
The great mighty poo and a sweet corn teeth.
Yeah.
You know?
I'd sing the song, but it's not appropriate.
No. Um. Was there anything you wanted to add onto the end of that?
No, I agree with a lot of stuff. You
Yeah.
say, like, I'm a huge believer in ancestral wisdom.
Yeah.
They ate things for a reason. They fermented things for a reason. It's only modern culture that doesn't do that. Anytime that we, would eat in ancient times, eat any kind of oats
Mhm.
or nuts or seeds, they were always soaked first and then cooked. You don't eat them raw. A lot of people nowadays can't even make porridge right. They just get some porridge oats, stick it in a bowl, and pour hot water over the top of it, and
I
think that
love
that's
how angry you
porridge.
get about how people eat porridge. You mention it every time.
Yeah, it annoys me, and it's not as good. If you cook it right, it is delicious. So good.
Yeah.
You soak them for 24 hours, then cook it in milk. It is the most delicious way to eat it. Obviously, put in butter with it as well because you want the fats, and then flavor it whatever way you want. But it is delicious. Even if you don't add any sugar, it's still tasty.
And this is coming from a guy who for quite some time used to eat bacon and eggs for breakfast every morning.
Me?
Yeah.
For quite some time, I'm doing it now.
Yeah.
I had it today: bacon, eggs, and sausage.
Yeah.
Almost every day.
Yeah. So
Like my main diet is meat.
well,
So I would say 80% of my
my,
diet at the minute is meat.
my point was a lot of people don't believe in like cereals and porridges for breakfast. You've always got that contingent of people who are like, why would I eat that when I can have a fry? You know.
Mm. Well, I think the fry is healthier. Not the way that is normally prepared. Most people, again, cook them in oil, which makes it inherently unhealthy. And then the bacon that they have is also full of sugar and lots of other stuff. But,
Yeah.
oh, I'm
Yeah.
going to have to cut this. I'm getting a phone call.
Yeah. Okay,
So,
so that was the podcast for today. We will be back next week with another one, and hopefully on time, as this is Monday, not Sunday or Saturday. So,
yeah. So,
yeah.
see you again next week. Thanks
Peace.
for listening. Peace.
Bye.
Bye.